Hello there, and thank you for joining us on A Call to Action. I'm Clarence Thomas Jr. with the great honor and the great pleasure today of filling in for your regular host and the creator of A Call to Action, Mr. Alex Habersham, who, by the way, is our guest today. Hello, Alex. How are you today?
Hey, Clarence. How you doing?
Okay, doing great, man. And thank you so much for permitting and allowing me to sit in for you today in the other chair, if you would.
Okay. Thank you for doing it.
Yes, sir. You know, Alex, this is indicative of the kind of person that you are and the kind of person that gives back and that is truly about helping and about making a way for others, if you would. I mean, really, truly it is. I just wanted to kind of start out by introducing to some and presenting to others Alex Habersham. Go over a little bit, Mr. Habersham, in all seriousness, a little bit about your personal background and a little bit about your professional background.
Okay, I'll be glad to do that if I can do it humbly, which is what my desire is. I'm a project boy.
Okay.
I was born right here in Macon, Georgia, in Tyndall Heights Project, and I've had a kind of an interesting history. When you kind of mentioned to me the other day that we're going to talk some about myself, you know, I began to reflect on, you know, when I first started being concerned about the community, particularly African Americans. And I went to Ballard Hudson High School, and I was the editor of the newspaper. And then I did an article back then that says that the Negro must learn to lift himself up by his own bootstraps.
Wow.
Now, I was only 17 or 18 years old at the time, but reflecting back on that, I think I've been always concerned about development and improvement in the community, and it started with that. But I went on to, after high school, went on to Savannah State.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Go Tigers.
2 thumbs up on that.
And taught school in Savannah after finishing. And then Dr. R.J. Martin, who was the principal, and we need to give a lot of recognition to him because as it relates to, and I'll call it that Negro education, you know, and as it relates to education in the community, he played a phenomenal role. Okay. You know, there were real strong teaching at Dear Ballard Hudson High School.
Yes, sir.
You know, where I went to high school. So after teaching in Savannah for 2 or 3 years, then Dr. Martin called me back to my high school, and I taught there and coached some there. And the interesting thing is, and a lot of people don't realize this, but when Macon was first integrated, as it relates to the schools being integrated, what they did is they integrated the teachers first. You know, so they said black teachers are white schools and white teachers are black schools, you know, kind of as an introduction to integrated schools. And I went to what was then Lanier High School. Okay. So now I'm coming out of Tyndall Heights.
Yeah.
You know, and they used to have football games at Porter Stadium, which I couldn't go to. Lanier High School played at Porter Stadium, but I couldn't go to the game. But a few years later, here I am, an instructor at Lanier High School, and I had fun, coached, and students were very respectful. So I taught in Macon for about 4 years, after which I started Habersham Records, you know, which is still in existence today. About 20 years ago, I gave it to my sister and your friend, Phyllis Habersham.
That's right.
Malone. I also started, and a lot of people may not know this, the Macon Courier, and I know you're going to have some comments about the Macon Courier later on. And back, I guess, even back then, you know, I've always realized how much potential and how many resources we have in our own community. You know, we don't have to be dependent on anybody if we were more interactive and supportive of ourselves and each other. So after realizing that maybe one way we could support ourselves and the community, you shouldn't ask me that. It might take 2 days from this.
That's okay, man. Take your time. Your show, sir.
So after realizing that, then, you know, back in 19 '82, I started the Macon, Middle Georgia Black Pages. But meanwhile, during the interim, I've owned a radio and TV repair shop, a game room, a car wash, a promotional company, a transportation company, and I mentioned the Black Pages. So I've been really, really involved in business. And then I also founded, one of the founders of the Adopt a Role Model program, which I've always tried to intermingle personal development and personal fortune with community development and community fortune. And I feel like I have enough, Clarence, I feel like I have, not only me, but I feel like every African American male living today has a responsibility to uplift our community. Because I just happen to be, I just look this good. I'm a little older than I look.
Okay now. Right.
I just happen to be old enough to remember the back of the bus, the color on the water fountain, and I just mentioned segregated schools. I mentioned also, and will now, only living in certain areas of town. So something had to happen, man. That just wasn't automatic. I remember all of the elected officials being white, but if you fast forward that thing, several years later, then we've had an African American mayor. We got African American who hold elected positions. We got African American who got buildings downtown, such as myself. We got African American who are doing business.
Call the roll.
And we got African Americans who live all over, this community in all the neighborhoods, even the $500,000 ones. Exactly. So, once you consider that, and that's what drives me. And I know some people played a role. It's not because of me, it's because of my dad and Mr. Aranda and Reverend Chambers and Albert Billingsley and several other people who gave of their lives to see to it that we could live better. So I love business. I love the community. I'm proud to what extent that I have of being able to try to make a difference.
Yes, sir. And that's exactly what it's really about, Alex, in all honesty. And you brought that point out last week when I was sitting in the other chair last week as your guest. And that is that it really is required. It's required of us now. It really is. And you've been doing it for a long time. Which is a sort of a lead in to a couple of things. Number one, I wanted to take the liberty now to say that they'll revisit what we talked about last week, and that is that there have been a plethora of people that have helped me along the way, and certainly Mr. Herbert Denard in Georgia, the former, have been in that equation and continue to be to this day. But I would be remiss if I didn't properly credit it, and that's the reporter in me. Wanted to make sure that I always attributed everything to the right source.
Of course.
And that is that in actuality it was Mr. Harris Walker Jr. And as serving as publisher at that time, back in the mid-'80s when I was still a student at Savannah State University, who gave me my first professional communications shot through the Macon Courier. So I just wanted to take some liberty to rectify that and to correct that. I charge it to my head and not my heart. But we know that Mr. Herbert Denard is highly instrumental, has been for a long time, and has blessed me with the work for him as a contributor and as a writer on occasion for over a decade now. So, but we don't want to leave out people like Mr. Harris Walker.
Can't leave out
Mr. Walker.
Teddy bear.
Yes, sir. Now, let's talk a little bit about who you called a few names, but talk to me, Alex, about some of the names, man, that this generation of young people in particular may not know. Shed some light on the history of Macon a bit from the perspective of who impacted you, who were some of the other players and key people that influenced you that we need to definitely know about.
Well, I'm glad you asked, because many of them don't have generally recognizable names. Reverend G.H. Mitchell would be one. Miss Martha Hooper, who was the director of over in Tyndall Heights.
Mhm.
And, you know, Mr. George Espy,
How about it?
you know, who
Yes.
was my high school English teacher and who was, you know, primarily responsible for my going to college because I enjoyed English so much, and many of the other teachers. And let me just say this, you know, the entity that played the major role
Mhm.
in kind of serving as guides. You know, there's an old saying that each one reach one and each one teach one.
Yes, sir.
Well, teachers, you know, in those environments, in those segregated environments, practiced that. You know, and they felt responsible to make sure. It's going to take 2 days to do this interview.
Take your time.
Okay.
Your show.
You know, you know, but they did everything they did to make sure, watch me now, that our lives were better than their lives.
Mhm.
You know, they felt a responsibility to keep the race
Yeah.
and the community moving forward. And it kind of, you know, it bothers me a little bit now these days. I'm going to say that again.
Go ahead, sir.
It bothers me more than a little bit that somehow it seems that many of us who are in responsible positions have forgotten that we've got an obligation to the entire community. And, you know, we wouldn't be holding these positions. I held several first black positions. You know, first black coach, first black this, and first black tax assessor. But that's not attributable to me. You know, my daddy probably could have done a better job than I did, but he didn't have the opportunity. And so there were some efforts exerted so I could have the opportunity, and I feel a responsibility, and everybody else should.
Y'all heard that? Did you?
Yeah, to give back to the community, because we can improve, lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We could really improve the community, and if we could, you know, be more participatory in several areas, politically, socially, economically, which we'll talk about in a minute, I'm sure,
Mhm.
and educationally.
You know, Alex, you have impacted this area more than you know, in several ways. You know, socially, politically, economically, certainly, and that's the one that I want to focus on here for a few minutes, from an economic standpoint. Two of the things that you were blessed by God and from my perspective, to implement and to infuse into this community are, number one, the Mega Middle Georgia Black Pages, and secondly, the Black Expo. These are two powerful mediums whereby especially the black community can connect and put into practice, not just talk or speak, but put into practice literally the things that you were just talking about, borrowing from Booker T. Washington, picking yourself up by your bootstraps. Expound on that. That's a must, because I think that the far-reaching impact of those two alone, in addition to everything else that you've done locally, as a, you know, from a political standpoint, and elsewhere, I think those two alone warrant you speaking and expounding for a while.
Well, I appreciate that thought. I had a concept back in 1990, I think it was. This is our 23rd year, of trying to devise a mechanism wherein we could direct more of the revenue, you know, generated by the black community back into the African American community. And I thought that the way to do this would be to put together, you know, a publication that would expose, you know, those African American businesses. And let me hastily say that African American dollars, matter of fact, 3.5 billion of them.
Wow. Is that what,
Can I
is
say
that
that
what it
again?
is? Is that what it is?
In Central Georgia.
Say it again.
3.5 billion. So this is by no means designed or intended to preach separatism. It's designed to promote and support self-help. And I really think, and I know I keep harping on that, but $3.5 billion is a lot of money, and it's generated in our community. I mean, we receive it in our community after taxes, $3.5 billion. So, it just seems to me, Brother Clarence, and I'm not too smart, but it just seems to me that if we could create a conscientiousness as it relates to trying to do more self-help in our community, not only economically, but educationally, socially, politically, and otherwise. But one mechanism is to support our community economically, because if that money kind of flows, more of it, of course not all of it, would flow more into our community, then it would improve, it would uplift the whole system. Watch me. A rising tide raises the whole ship. So as
It's philosophical with it.
yeah. So if the African American community could do better, it would uplift the whole community, because with that money circulating in the community, it could advance education, spirituality, politics, and all other elements of our community. Because as we know, money plays a major role in accomplishing just about any and everything.
Yes, man.
Yeah. So
Capitalistic society.
realizing that, I said, well, maybe this mechanism could help. So I started, several years ago, and with the assistance of Tina Denard, she and I started the Macon, Middle Georgia Black Pages. Back in the first edition was 1991. In the 92 edition, I launched a Adopt a Role Model program along with Tina. And so what we do with this, and then I got another initiative I wish you allow me to talk about in a minute.
Help yourself. It's your show.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So what we propose to do when we started publishing this book is to eliminate some excuses, not only on the part of African Americans, but on the part of the majority community too, because we invest in the entire community. When we spend our money at the mall, when we pay taxes, everything that we do, as a people in this community, that we're giving to the community. We're investing in the community. And I submit that, not only African Americans, but the whole community would benefit if it were to invest back in us. But particularly, those of us who look like us. So here it is, the Macon, Middle Georgia Black Pages. This is the 23rd edition. And we've identified, literally several hundred businesses, African American owned, and major corporations and other entities that think it would not be robbery to support the economic development of the African American community. But I just think, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, sir.
I want to create, if I can, I want this to be my legacy. I want to create a conscientiousness on the part of the African American community that we can help ourselves. And that, at least once a week or even more often, we ought to see to it psychologically, and I'll be conscious about the fact that, well, hey, I got $100 to spend, let me see. I'll go to the Georgia Informer. He got some in there too. My friend Urban Denard, who just walked in.
Yes, sir.
Let me see if there's a business, that I can spend some. Let me be conscientious about playing a role, in developing my community by taking some of the dollars and trying to uplift and upgrade my community economically. Because last time I checked, can I say it again?
It's your show.
Last time I checked, there are a lot of entities in our community who don't seem to recognize and appreciate the economic role that we play. And I mean, be that as it may, but I am sure that we can advance our community by, participating in a program that I'm going to introduce real soon, which is called, I used to call it the 5% solution, but I upped it, I doubled it. I'm calling it the 10% solution, which essentially says that see to it on a monthly or weekly and or a daily basis that you take 10% additional. Spend 10% additional with an African American business and do something to try to uplift your community. Now let me tell you something, based on $3.5 billion, we ought to have, 1,000 African-American millionaires
Wow.
in Central Georgia, minimally. And we can do that, and we can advance that, and we can raise the whole ship by spending more money with African American businesses with each other, and look forward to learning more about the 10% solution, because everybody, Clarence, everybody can play a role in improving our community, not only as it relates to each one, reach one, but also as it relates to each one, spend more.
Okay. Yes, sir.
With that one could be $1, it could be 100, or it could be 1,000. But I mean, if we were to kind of get in the habit of doing that, and remember, my feelings about everybody has a responsibility, to the community, not just cause, I live in Lizella that I think that I'm separated. I wouldn't even be in Lizella unless it was in one of those shotgun houses.
Okay.
Were it not
Yes, sir.
for people who saw to it, including my education at Belliston High School, and Mr. Billingsley, Mr. Randall, and Reverend Chambliss, and Reverend, it ain't Monroe, I'll think of his name in a minute, but several other individuals, and I would be remiss if I didn't, and they came here a couple of times, if I didn't recognize them. This ain't man, Abernathy and King and Jackson and John Lewis. I saw him the other day, and when the president was, doing the 50th anniversary of LBJ, and then I just thought about it. I said, that's a great man right there. Many of our young people don't realize it. And then the other thing we can do as it relates to spending more money, we need to be sure that our young people know our history. They need to put down those games and all that, get what they ought to be doing with those iPads and those tablets and those Kindles. I had a conversation today with Herbert Denard. He was telling me how somebody influenced him. He was an 18-year-old private. Said, boy, while you read that comic book, you ought to read something else, Richard Wright and some others. So James Baldwin and others. So, I just feel very strongly, and I would consider it a personal favor. If more of us, if all of us will try to be more conscientious about the role that we need to play in our community, to uplift it and to develop it and improve it, because it's going to be win-win-win-win-win situation. Because the community going to win, African Americans going to win, the majority of the community is going to win, the educational system is going to win, the political system is going to win, the spiritual elements in our community is going to win, because we can donate more money to the church. So everything that we do will be very, very important in trying to uplift the community. And again, as it relates to that, make wise use of our resources. Make wise use of our dollars. And if anybody, we've got plenty of publications left. If anybody wants to get a publication, they can just call the office at 478-464-0074. And it is also online. So we got a book.
Okay.
It's online at www.makeemblackpages.com, and we've got a CD.
Okay.
And pretty soon we're gonna have an app.
All right.
So you can find those resources with which you can be a part. I want everybody to do it, of the 10% solution.
You got it. You covered it real well. We got about a minute before our break, and I want to use this time to segue to something that I heard you infuse as you were expounding and talking about economics and the power of economics and supporting our own in the black community. I heard you mention about starting a youth program, and your passion and your interest in that is really underrated and in many instances unknown. And we want to use that time coming back out of the break to let you talk further and speak more to why that is pertinent and has to happen in our community. We have to make sure that why it's mandatory that we walk a walk every day that is impactful and positively impressive to our youngsters, especially black youth. And with that said, this is a call to action.
A call to action.
Alex, I wanted to also, while we're dealing with that, a lot of people don't discount the impact, the overall impact of not doing those things, not being actively engaged in the lives of youth in that way, be it personally or as a volunteer friend of a youngster. What are, just very briefly, man, could you just roll off some of the negative, some of the negative impact that this has on the community when we turn our heads or act as though it doesn't exist or don't get involved?
I'm gonna start with a positive impact.
Okay.
I used to be the president, the board chair of a program that started at over there in East Macon, where Roger Jackson is, that community center over there. I can't think of the name. And very quickly, there was a lady named Shakita Davis. Might be mispronouncing it. But anyway, she's the director of workforce development. And she was in that program, and I think she was a welfare mother. She was in that program. Now she's the director of community development, economic, workforce development, for Bibb County. And she was in my office the other day, and she said that, Mr. Habersham, one of the major reasons that I am successful is because you looked at me when I graduated from that program and said, that young lady's going to be something one day. And she said, I pointed my finger at her and said, you hear me?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So, we know all the negativity, but what we need to concentrate on is a positivity that can happen in our community if, in fact, we were to take an interest in our children.
What is the overall impact? I mean, what is the overall responsibility of the entire community? Not just a specific segment of the population, but the entire community.
Everybody has a responsibility because this is civilization. This is a civilized society, and we're all in a law. I'll tell you what it is: a rising tide raises the whole ship.
And you heard it, maybe not first, but again, if you have before, here on a call to action.
Call to action.
Which I had the pleasure of hosting today, courtesy of my good friend and my mentor and my colleague, Mr. Alex Habersham. Thank you all so much for tuning in to a call to action. We appreciate you, and we will see you again next time.
www.makingblackpages.com